Okay, this is our review for writing equations chapter. I'm going through each of the examples on our review, and you can fast forward. I put the numbers at the top, so whatever you need to go over, you can just pause and watch the questions you need, or you can obviously watch everything if you need to, but again, strongly suggested that you go ahead and do the entire review by yourself and then come and watch this to make sure you have it right, or if you need to watch it again to see how to do something. If you are only filling it out while I'm explaining how to do everything, then you need to go back and try to do it again on your own, covering up your answer, because that's the only way you're going to get better. Just watching me and practicing while I'm telling you how to do it is not going to help you on the test. Okay, so let's get started. Number 1 and 2. It says to write an equation in the line in slope-intercept form. We have to remember that slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b, where m stands for your slope and b stands for your y-intercept, both of which you were given here. So I'm given the m, I'm given the b here, I'm given the m, and I'm given the b. So all we're doing is placing this into form. So in the first one, I'm going to get y equals negative 1/3 x, and then that's a positive 5, so it's plus 5. Number 2 is y equals 4x, and then minus 7, because that's a negative 7. So both of those are now in slope-intercept form, and we are done with number 1 and 2. Numbers 3 and 4, same thing, we're writing in slope-intercept form. So I've got y equals mx plus b, that's the form that I want. And this time I'm given 2 points, but I'm not given the slope. In the first one, I'm going to go ahead and count it. If I'm given the graph, it's easy to count. So it's always my y value, change in y over the change in x. I look at this, it's a positive slope, so I know I'm going to get a positive number. And I'm going to go ahead and put that over here so I don't mistakenly put a negative. So that's going to be a plus. And I'm going up 1, 2, 3. And I'm going over 1, 2, 3, 4. So my slope on this one is 3/4, and my y-intercept is pretty easy. It's where x is 0. I can see that it crosses the y-intercept right here. So my b in this case is negative 5. And to put that back into form is pretty easy. It's y equals 3/4 x. And that's a negative number, so minus 5. On the next one, I'm going to do the same thing. If you would like to, you certainly may use the 2 points and use the slope formula, but if I've got a graph, I'm going to go ahead and count it. This is a negative slope, so this time I'm going to go ahead with my m and say negative so I don't forget that. So I'm going to go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and over 2, 1, 2, so it's negative 6. Over 2, but what I notice is they both have a factor of 2 in them, so I can reduce that, so that becomes negative 3, and you can put it as negative 3 or negative 3 over 1. My y-intercept again is pretty clear. It's right on my graph here, and it's where x is 0, so my y-intercept in this case is 2. So when I write this equation, I'm going to write it below so we can see the whole thing. So it's y equals, and I can either put negative 3 over 1 or negative 3 x, and then it's plus 2 because 2 was positive in this case. So there's number 3 and 4. So for 5 and 6, you are writing equations. We have been writing equations this year, but it's asking you to write it in slope-intercept form. So a Poplar Pizza Parlor charges $10 for a large cheese pizza plus $2 for each additional topping. Again, to remind us, it's y equals mx plus b. And remember, m is your slope or rate of change, and b is your constant or your y-intercept. It's the same thing. It's the same pattern. We're just calling it different things depending on what we're using it for. Since we're not graphing a line, we may not use slope and y-intercept, but this still is your rate of change, and this is always your constant because it's a number by itself. So if I'm looking, I have 2 numbers here. I have the $10 and I have the $2. So I need to figure out which one stands alone and which one is being multiplied by something. The words here for each should be helpful to me. because I'm going to pay an additional $2 for each additional topping. That means that's going to be multiplied by how many toppings I get. The $10 for the large cheese pizza, that's just $10. That's a flat rate. So when I write my equation is going to look like this. And it says it wants to use C and T. So instead of Y and X, so instead of Y, I'm going to have C here, and instead of X, I'm going to have T here for the toppings, because that $2 is going to be multiplied by that topping. So I get the total cost equals $2, right? The $2 times T plus 10, because it's $10 for the original. So what's the constant of this function? We've already talked about it. That's the $10. And what's the rate of change? The rate of change here is $2. So for each additional topping, it's going to change by 2. If I look down at the next example, it's the same type of thing. So it says, again, write an equation in slope-intercept form. So I'm going to put my form up here. Slope-intercept looks like this. Remember, B is your constant, M is your slope or rate of change. And so for the cost of C, for the membership of M months. So it says the startup fee is $145. The monthly fee is $45. So monthly, that means I'm going to be paying that every month. The $145 I'm not paying for every month. So that's going to be my constant. So in this one, I'm going to go ahead and, since we've already talked about it, the constant is going to be $145 because that's a one-time fee. And the rate of change every month is going to be 45 because that's how much I'm paying each month. So when we write that in terms of C and M, this is going to be my C. This will be my M here. In this case, your slope is going to be that rate of change, and your B is your y-intercept. So when I write my equation, it's C equals 45 M plus 145. And that's all you need to do. It's not asking me to solve anything else. It's just asking me to write the equation, identify the constant, and identify the rate of change. Remember, rate of change is just another name for slope. Slope is a type of rate of change. Okay, 7 and 8. So now we're writing in point slope form and slope intercept form and standard form for the line that passes through the given point with the given slope. If it gives you a point and a slope, it's pretty easy to put it into point slope form. So I'm going to start with that. So I get y plus 3 because it's y minus a negative 3. So y plus 3 equals, and this is a negative 1/2 times the quantity x plus 6. And that's already putting it in point slope form. So I'm going to go ahead and transfer that over here. But that's how we have to start. And we give you that opportunity to start with point slope, then slope intercept, and then standard, because that is the easiest way to move through the 3 forms of a line. Okay, so now I multiply through with my slope, same steps every time. So I get y plus 3 equals negative 1/2 x, oops, make that a little better, x, and then minus 3 because negative 1/2 times 6 is negative 3. Then we subtract 3 from both sides to get y by itself, and I get y equals negative 1/2 x minus 6. And if you notice, this is now in slope-intercept form. That's the next form I need. So y equals negative 1/2 x minus 6. And then now we need to move it into standard form, which standard form is that ax plus by, write this here again, by equals c. And remember, a cannot be negative, it can't be a fraction, and these cannot both be 0, which none of the ones that we give you are both 0, but just so you know, you can't have both of them be 0 in standard form. So to move into standard form, what we have to do is we have to move the x term and then make sure that it's a positive number in front. So I'm going to go ahead and start this up here. So I'm going to add, let's say, add 1/2 x just to save room. And add 1/2 x. So I'm going to finish over here in this white space that I have. So I have 1/2 x, then it's plus y because that's a positive y equals negative 6. Well, my problem is this is a fraction. I cannot have a fraction. So to get rid of a fraction, remember we multiply by the denominator because that will get rid of, I think I'm going to put it over here to say that I'm multiplying everything by 2. So everything inside this entire equation has to be multiplied by 2. So this becomes not 2x, this becomes 1x. Erase that. So we get 1x, or just x, plus 2y equals negative 12. Because we had to get rid of that fraction in the front for it to be in standard form. So then our standard form is x plus 2y equals negative 12, and we're done. We've worked through the entire thing: point slope form, slope intercept form, and standard form. Note that in point slope and slope intercept, I see the slope. In standard form, I do not see the slope. I mean, that is not one that I can just pick out a number in front of it, which some of you like to do. We can't do that there. So let's go ahead and do number 8. Same way, we're going to start with point slope form. So I get y minus 2 equals negative 4 times x minus 5. Okay, so that is my point slope form. So I get y minus 2 equals negative 4 times the quantity x minus 5. Done. Now we're going to go ahead and do our slope intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b. So that means I have to multiply through. So I get negative 4x plus 20 equals, and then I have y minus 2 on the left. Then we're going to add 2 to both sides, and we get y equals negative 4x plus 22. And so that's what I transfer over here. As long as I've got y equals and then my x term and my constant, I'm good. X plus 22. And that is a 4, in case you can't tell. And then for the last one, I've got to move it into standard form. So that means I'm going to move this term back over here. So I'm going to add 4x. Add 4x. So these cancel, and I get, let's see here, 4x plus y equals 22. And I look at my a term to determine whether I have to do anything or if I see a fraction anywhere in here. So there's no fraction, and this is positive, so I'm already done. I'm done in standard form. So 4x plus y equals 22. Okay, number 9 and 10. Let's see if we can get there. Okay, so now we're going to do the same thing, except we're not given a point and a slope. We actually have to figure out the slope. We know the first thing we do anytime we have 2 points is to find the slope. We know we can do that. If you need to, you can still be labeling at this point. I'm not going to because I don't need to. So negative 4 minus 4 over negative 1 minus 3 equals negative 8 over negative 4, which reduces to 2. Okay, so our slope is 2. Now that I have my slope, it's just like 7 and 8. It doesn't matter which point you pick. The only thing that will be different is your point slope form from somebody else's if they pick the other point, but slope intercept form and standard form will be the same. So if you have chosen a different point than me, that's fine in your point slope form. What you need to make sure is your slope intercept form and your standard form are the same as mine. So I'm going to go ahead and pick the 3 and the 4 just because I like to deal with just the positive intercept. So I get y minus 4 equals 2 times x minus 3. And again, now it's in point slope form, so I can just transfer that over. So y minus 4 equals 2 times the quantity x minus 3. Now we're going to move it into slope intercept form, so that means I have to multiply through here. So I get y minus 4 equals 2x minus 6, and then we add 4 to both sides. So that cancels, so I get y equals 2x minus 2. And we're in slope intercept form, so y equals 2x minus 2. And then now I need to move it into standard form. So moving it into standard form is a process of moving my x term and then seeing whether I need to do anything else. So I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides, and I get negative 2x plus y equals negative 2. And what I should notice is I have a negative here. There's no fraction, but I have a negative. To take care of the negative, I'm going to multiply or divide the whole thing by -1 because that will change all the signs. And some of you are kind of at that point where you just know to change all the signs and you're okay, which is fine, but you are multiplying or dividing by -1 when you do that. So you get 2x minus y equals 2. So all of my signs changed. And now I'm in standard form. 2x minus y equals 2. Remember, the y can be negative. It's only the leading coefficient, that a, that cannot be negative. So now let's go to number 10. We're going to do the same thing. Let's start by finding slope. So I get 2 minus a -2 over 9 minus 6. 2 minus a -2, that becomes a nice plus. So I get 4/3. Okay, so my slope is 4/3. And now I use that slope in either one of the points. Again, it doesn't matter. I'm going to go ahead and use 9-2. If you use the other one, your point slope form is going to be different. Just make sure you have a -6 and a +2 when you do it. But your slope intercept form and standard form should match the one I do. So I'm going to get y minus 2 equals 4/3 times the quantity x minus 9. Okay, so that's my point slope form. So y minus 2 equals 4/3 times the quantity x minus 9. Again, I'm just transfer that straight over. I put it into slope intercept form. Then I multiply through for my slope intercept. So I'm going to multiply through, and I get y minus 2 equals 4/3 x, and then 9 times 5, 4/3. 9 times 4 is 36, divided by 3 is 12, so it's minus 12. If you can't do those in your head, you have a calculator, you need to use a tool to get yourself through this because fractions don't go away. And so now we're going to add 2 to both sides. And I get y equals 4/3 x minus 10. Okay, so now I'm in slope intercept form. So y equals 4/3. And notice my slope has not changed. It should not change from form to form because it's the same line. So if you get a different slope, something happened in your calculations. Okay, now we need to move to standard form. So when I move to standard form, it means I have to move this x term. So I'm going to subtract 4/3 x, subtract 4/3 x, and these cancel. So I get negative 4/3 x plus y equals negative 10. Well, there's two things wrong with this leading coefficient. One, it's a fraction, and number two, it's negative. So in this case, there's two things I have to multiply by, but I can do it at the same time. I know to get rid of the negative, I have to multiply by -1. So that's going to be part of it. But then I also know I have to multiply by whatever the denominator is. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply by -3. That means everything inside here is being multiplied by -3. The whole reason I multiplied by -3 was to make this a positive number. If you do not get a positive integer, we did something wrong, or I multiplied by the wrong thing, or I didn't understand what needed to cancel. But -3, this is like -3 over 1, -3 over -3 will cancel, so I get 4x. This now becomes -3y because I'm multiplying by -3. And then equals -3 times -10 is positive 30. So my standard form here is 4x minus 3y equals 30. Okay, and we've done all three forms then for both of those, 9 and 10. Now when I look at the next few, 11, 12, 13, and 14, and you may think, well, I don't have enough room to do this. Well, part of this is being able to look at a point and know what slope of 0 and know what slope, an undefined slope means, okay? So when it says, what is the equation of the line that passes through -1, 4 with an undefined slope? As soon as I see undefined or when I see 0, I should think either y equals or x equals. So undefined is the one that doesn't make sense. It's the only equation we talk about that starts with a different letter. So as soon as I see undefined, I should think, oh, that's an x equals line. Well, as long as they give me 1 point on that line, I know what x equals. In this case, it's going to be -1, and we're done. So when you see undefined slope, it's an x equals line, and it's going to go through, in this case, -1, because that's on the line. So every point here is going to be -1 something. So number 12, what's the equation line that passes through -5, -4 with a slope of 0? You should be thinking, well, if that was x equals, then this one's going to be y equals. And y equals what? Y equals -4. And we are done. Number 13, what's the equation of the line that passes through 7, -4, and 7, 1. Some of you are savvy enough to see now that like as soon as you start seeing a repeating number, well, that means that x is always going to be 7, right? So I could essentially go straight here and say, well, x equals 7. If you don't see that right away, I'm going to do my slope formula. When I do my slope formula, I get 1 minus a -4 over 7 minus 7. And so I get 5 over 0. This is not 0. This is undefined. You guys usually are pretty good at saying, well, that's undefined, but then you stick a 0 in there. 0 and undefined are not the same thing. So if it's an undefined slope, that's the one that doesn't make a lot of sense. It goes straight up and down. It's the x equals, and in this case, the 7's repeating is a great indicator that it's going to be x equals 7. So now when we look at the next one, what is the equation line that passes through this? I should notice that my y's are repeating. If I see that right away, I could say y equals 5 and be done. If I don't, when I do my slope formula here, I get 5 minus 5 over -3 minus a -8. Or I'm sorry, not minus a -8, just minus 8. And we get 0 over -11. Well, in this case, 0 on top, I can have 0 -11s. So this is a 0 slope. 0 slopes are a y equals line, and in this case it's going to be y equals 5. Okay, so let's look at 15 and 16. So this should be very similar to the last 4 that we just did. I notice that this has an undefined slope, right? And if you need to, you can make a table. I'll go ahead and do it on this one. We probably should be past that point, but if you're just really struggling, start picking some points off of this. So in this case, it'd be 4, 1. This one would be 4, 0. This one would be 4, -1. I mean, any of these, what I see is my x's are repeating, so this is x equals 4. And then here, that's a 0 slope. All my y's are the same. I'm not going to make a table on this one. And you should write y equals -2 in this case. And that's the example here. We should be able to start looking at these lines and seeing right away that's y equals -2. This is x equals 4, etc. Now when I go to 17, 18, 19, and 20, we're talking about parallel and perpendicular slopes, okay? And all it is asking for is the slope. It doesn't ask you for the equation yet. So we should remember that parallel slopes, parallel lines look like this. They will never touch each other. The reason they never touch is that their rates of change, whatever that is, are going to be the exact same, because if they were different at all, eventually they would cross. So what's the slope of the line that's parallel to the graph of y equals 3x minus 5? Well, the slope here is 3, so the parallel slope is going to be 3. It's going to be the same thing, whatever that is. 18, what is the slope of the line that is parallel to the graph of 4x plus 3y equals 1? Please do not make the mistake of pulling this 4 off and saying that it is the slope. This is not in any kind of slope-intercept or slope-intercept or point-slope form. This is in standard. If you hear the word standard, there's no slope in standard. So I have to solve for the slope. So I'm going to subtract 4x from both sides. And I get, let me write over here so I have a little more room. So I have 3y equals -4x plus 1. And then I'm going to divide by 3. And remember, all I'm looking for here is slope. So I'm done. So my parallel slope is -4/3. Okay, I just want the same thing of whatever slope this gives me. I'm not trying to make that into a perfect line or anything else. I'm just looking for slope. So then here it says 19. What is the slope of the line that is perpendicular to the graph of y equals -1/4 x plus 3? Again, all I have to do is locate the slope. Slope is -1/4. I want the one that is perpendicular, not parallel. So that means I'm going to take the opposite, so it's going to become positive, and then I'm going to flip it. So the perpendicular slope here is positive 4 over 1, or you could put 4. Either one is acceptable. 20, what's the slope of the line that's perpendicular to the graph of 2x minus 5y equals negative 10? Again, this is in standard form. I don't know the slope yet. I cannot pick that 2. That is not the slope. So I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides. I get negative 5y equals negative 2x minus 10. And then I divide by negative 5, divide by negative 5, divide by negative 5. And really, I'm just looking at the slope, so I get negative 2 over negative 5, which that really is a negative over negative gives me a positive. So the perpendicular slope here is positive 2/5. Okay? I'm sorry. I just did that wrong. This is why you have to do this. Okay. That was the same slope. What's the perpendicular slope? Perpendicular slope, if it's positive 2/5, that means I have to flip it and make it negative, so it's going to be negative 5/2. Okay? So negative 5/2 is the correct perpendicular slope to this graph. 2/5 would be the parallel, negative 5/2 is the perpendicular. Okay, let's go on to 21 and 22. Now we're using that information to actually make an equation in slope-intercept form, okay? Not all three, just the one. So the first thing we have to do is just identify the slope. So the slope is 1/4 here of this line. So the slope of the parallel line will also be 1/4. And as soon as I have that, I use this slope and this point, and that's going to give me my new line. So I get y plus 5 equals 1/4 times the quantity x minus 4. I always put it in point slope form first because I'm given a point and a slope, and that's the easiest one to put it in. If you would like to, you can use the y equals mx plus b and solve for b, but you can also always use this way. And this is the way I'm going to show everybody on the video. So y plus 5 equals 1/4 x, and then minus 1, because 1/4 times 4 is negative 1. And then I'm going to subtract 5 on both sides. And so I get y equals 1/4 x minus 6. Okay, so that is the line. So y equals 1/4 x minus 6. Okay, and my slope should be the same because this is a parallel line, and it should not be any different. My intercepts are different. That way I know that they hit the y-intercept at the y-axis at a different point, so they indeed are parallel. I'm going to do the same thing with 22. It doesn't give it to me quite as nicely because I have to figure out the slope here. So I'm going to first move my standard form into point slope form so I can see what that slope is. I get 2y equals negative 6x plus 12. Then we're going to divide by 2. And so my original line was y equals negative 3x plus 6. And so I'm going to, the slope of the parallel line will be negative 3. I'm going to want to identify that first because that's the slope I'm going to use. It's the same here. So now I'm going to go ahead and plug that in using the new point and that same slope. So I get y minus 1 equals negative 3 times x minus 2. We multiply through here, so I get y minus 1 equals negative 3x plus 6. Then we're going to add 1, and I get y equals negative 3x plus 7. And if I look at my original number, so this was negative 3x plus 6, different y-intercept, same slope. That lets me know that they are indeed parallel. So I get y equals negative 3x plus 7. So that's how you find the parallel lines. We use the same slope of whatever line they give us originally, and then we use the new point. That's it. It's the same thing that we've been doing. Please don't confuse yourself. On 23 and 24, we're going to do the same thing, only now we're going to find the perpendicular slope. So if this is my slope here, I don't want the same slope, I want the perpendicular slope because I want to find that. So that's going to be a negative, and then I flip it. So this is like 2 over 1, so it's going to be negative 1/2. Okay, so if that's negative 1/2, I'm now using this new slope and this point to find my new line. Let's go ahead and do this. So we're going to get y minus 3 equals negative 1/2 times the quantity x plus 6. And then I multiply through, so I get y minus 3 equals negative 1/2, better have that same perpendicular slope, x, and negative 1/2 times positive 6 is negative 3. So we're going to add 3, and I get y equals negative 1/2 x, and this became a 0, so I don't have to put it down. You don't have to put plus 0. That does indicate, though, that it goes through the origin because there's no y-intercept other than 0, so it's going to go right through that origin on this equation here. So we get y equals negative 1/2 x. We're going to do the same thing here. Of course, we have to find the slope first, so I don't know what the perpendicular slope is because I don't know what the original slope was. So I subtract 2x. Remember, to move a term, I always add or subtract it. To remove part of a term, I multiply or divide. So we get negative 2x plus 16. We divide by negative 4. So my original equation in slope-intercept form is going to be 1/2 x minus 4, because 16 divided by negative 4 is 4. So that's my original line, but I need to find the perpendicular slope to that. Remember, we're finding perpendicular. So I'm going to flip it and make it opposite, so that is now negative 2. So I'm going to use this negative 2 and this point to find my new line. I'm going to do that under here. So I get y plus 7 equals negative 2 times x plus 2. And I multiply through. These should become pretty easy steps for you now because we keep doing them. Negative 2x. Notice that the procedure is the same no matter what the numbers are. Minus 4. And then we subtract 7. I don't know why I wanted to subtract 6. Subtract 7. And so that cancels, so we get y equals negative 2x minus 11. I'm just going to double check. I have negative 2 here, positive 1/2 here. Those are perpendicular, so I know this is my line. So y equals negative 2x minus 11. All right, for 25, 26, and 27, now you're determining whether these are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. Remember, parallel slopes will be the same, perpendicular slopes will be opposite reciprocals, and neither means that we don't get either of those things. Okay, so in this case, the slope here is negative 1/2. The slope here is 2, so these would be perpendicular slopes. And because they are opposite, and we can say opposite inverses, multiplicative inverses, or opposite reciprocals. Okay, here I know this slope, but I need to double check what this one is. So I'm going to subtract 4x. Some of you probably can already see what this is going to be. So I get negative 3y equals negative 4x plus 6. And just so you know, I'm already looking and knowing that this is going to be negative 4 over 3. And so negative 4 over negative 3 is going to be 4/3. Well, 4/3 and 3/4 are not opposite reciprocals, and they're not the same. Just to show you, I'll finish off the step. But negative 4 over 3 is really 4/3. So they're going to be neither, because they're not opposite reciprocals and they're not the same. So then here I'm looking for the same, hopefully. I'm looking for parallel. There's a couple ways to look at this. One, I could see that the ratio from the x term to the y term are the same. So if I do, because I'm going to subtract this term, so I get negative 2 divided by 7. So that's negative 2/7. Well, negative 4 divided by 14 is also negative 2/7 if I work it out. So these actually will be parallel. And the parallel slopes will be negative 2/7. And I'll go ahead and do that down here so you can see how I got that. So I get 2x plus 7y equals negative 35. This one is 4x plus 14y equals negative 42. The pen's not cooperating. So I get minus 2x minus 2x. I'm going to subtract the 4x at the same time. We'll just solve both of them simultaneously. So I get 7y equals negative 2x minus 35 here. And then here we get 14y equals negative 4x minus 42. And we'll divide by 7, divide by 7, divide by 7, divide by 7. And I get, or I'm sorry, divide by 14, not 7. 14. And so here I get negative 2/7 as my slope, because remember, all I'm concerned about really is my slope here. Also here I'm going to get negative 4 over 14, which is negative 2/7. And since the slopes are the same, we get, slopes same. Okay. And then we're on to our second to last group. This is that positive, negative, or no correlation, and describe the situation. I think most of you got this pretty easily. If I look at 28, I see a positive slope as I'm going up kind of with my line. They don't all connect perfectly, but that is a positive correlation. And you have to explain it too. So as the years go on, it says the domestic traveler spending in the U.S. from 1987 to 1999. An easy way to say that would be from 1987 to 1999, the domestic traveler spending in the U.S. increased. Okay, that's all you have to say. But it does have to be written down on your paper. I'm not writing it here, but you need to write it on your paper. If I look here, I don't see any kind of line that is easy to see, so this is called a no correlation. And obviously no explanation is needed for a no correlation because they just don't match. None of the points go together. If I look at 30, if I'm looking again, kind of if I drew a line through here, that'd be a negative slope, so that is a negative correlation. And again, you have to be able to explain what it means. So as the minutes go up, it says the average cycling speed. So as the minutes go by, like if the longer I've been biking or cycling, the miles per hour goes down, which would make sense because you'd become fatigued and you couldn't go as fast as you did in the beginning. So it just means that you're slowing down the more minutes you cycle. And then on the last one, this is actually a review. It asks you to graph the following equations. So the first one, I could do the x and y intercepts. I think a lot of you have forgotten how to do that though. So I'm going to move it into slope-intercept form because that's easy to graph from. I'm going to subtract my x term because this is in standard form. You should recognize that. And so I get y equals negative 2x plus 4. So 4 is my y-intercept, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I put a dot. And then my slope, or how I move from there, is negative 2 over 1. So I'm going to go down 2 over 1, down 2 over 1, down 2 over 1. And since I have a grid, I like to put more, especially with this tablet. It's not going to be real straight for me. But I'm going to try to get as straight as I can. And when I connect dots, it's a little easier. Oops, that's not great, but yours can be straighter. And if I notice that this is a negative slope, I better make sure this is a negative slope, which it definitely is. So that one's done. This one is in point slope form. And again, you can multiply through and put it in, what do you call it? Slope intercept form. I can move that from point slope, multiply through. But you can also use this to help me graph. Because I have a point here. If you remember, the x value is negative 3. That's why it was minus a negative 3. That's how I get a plus. And then the y value was 2. So one of my points is negative 3, 2. So 1, 2, negative 3, 2. I got it straight from that format. And then now my slope is up 1 over 3, up 1 over 3, up 1 over 3. Okay. Oops. Erase that because my pen jumped. I'm going to show you also how you could have solved it for y equals mx plus b and gotten the same thing. So you're going to multiply through on the 1/3, so you get y minus 2 equals 1/3 x plus 1. And then you add 2, and so you get y equals 1/3 x plus 3. Let's see if that matched what I did. I have a y-intercept of 3, yes. And it went up 1 over 3, up 1 over 3. Slope's going to be the same. So this does match also by finding that point. You just have to be real careful because if it's a plus, that really was a negative 3x value. And if it's a minus, that's really a positive 2 value. Just so you remember if you're going to pull a point straight from that form. It's a little straighter. Okay, so there's your line, positive slope, positive slope. Last one, I'm going to go ahead and do the x and y intercepts just so we remember how to do that. So to find my x-intercept, I drop off my y, so I get 3x equals 6, and I get x equals 2, because you divide both sides by 3. So x-intercept is going to be 2. My y-intercept, negative 2y, equals 6. So I divide both sides by negative 2, so I get y equals negative 3. So I'm going to go down 3, 1, 2, 3. And then all I have to do is connect the dots, and I get my line. Okay, you could also solve this for y equals, and if you do that, you'll get y equals, let's see here, it'll be positive 3 halves x minus 3. And let's make sure that matches this line here. So it's a negative 3 y-intercept, up 3 over 2, up 3 over 2. Yes, that'll match. So it's a positive slope, positive line. That's your review. You should know how to do every one of these by the time you walk into class on Tuesday.